The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for connecting on this morning. We've had a really good hit rate of people connecting today, so it's great to see a list of names online down the side of the screen. My name's David Rawle. I'm the Technical Director for Byte Security Partnerships, and those of you that know how I tend to work with these sessions will know that I will keep my talking to the absolute minimum and very quickly hand over to the guys from ForeScout and LogRhythm. Obviously, the seminar today, or the webinar today even, myself, I'm doing the introduction. We've got Rich Agar from ForeScout and Richard Ferrier from LogRhythm, two of the senior SEs from both teams. So they're going to be going through some specifics, a little bit of a technical demo, and a little bit of slide deck for you to show some, actually having seen what they're doing, it's actually quite interesting, and show you some mitigation and how these two products can work together. So just a little bit of scene setting for you. A few of you will already know this, but I've been at 2 vendor events in the last month. I've been to Checkpoint's vendor event and I've been to F5's vendor event. And I've been offered, I counted them this morning when I prepped this deck, I've actually been offered 4 devices that plug in via USB. I've been handed 3 battery packs and I've been handed 1 USB stick. And it just made me think about it. It made me think about just how many of your staff are being handed stuff that plugs in, that they just plug into their laptop without thinking about it, or their desktop without thinking about it every day. And it just made me wonder, you know, I've had 4 in 3 to 4 weeks, as I said. And some of you may know, because we've talked about this in the past at previous events, that when the Stuxnet virus first came into being and started existing in its targeted home of the Iranian nuclear enrichment plants, that was actually got in via USB sticks, and there were USB sticks with 0-day vulnerabilities being exploited on them and 0-day malware. You know, we pick up this stuff from vendors who we think we trust all the time, and we plug them in, and we don't really think about it. And most staff, to be honest, probably don't think about it. So, you know, how can you deal with that? How can you even get any visibility of what's going on and stop things happening to you? And like I said, that's really one of the questions I raised specifically because I think this is a key part of the demo today. But it's this integrated type of event on your network where multiple things are coming together, that combining products like ForeScout and LogRhythm can really help you with. I think there's a really big focus on everybody being obsessed with single panes of glass at the moment. And what we're going to show you today, when I hand over to Rich Ferrier first, but what we're going to show you today is how actually by choosing appropriate technology that works together well, you can actually really go to a long way to find a very high level of IT security in your network. So what I'm going to do is hand over, without further ado, to Rich Ferrier. Rich, are you there?
I am here, Dave, thank you.
Okay, I will make you the panelist right now. There we go. Okay. I'll mute out and leave you to it.
Okay, so firstly I'd like to sort of do a bit of scene setting as well. You know, what we're seeing as cyber threats in the infrastructure of clients and customers today. What we're really seeing is, you know, an increase in attack vectors, the surface growing, you know, with things like bring your own device, moving to the cloud, people bringing more, you know, Internet of Things within it, and working more from a sort of mobile, remote sort of way of working. And the attacks that we're actually seeing as well, they're very well motivated, very well funded, a lot more targeted towards certain people maybe within the company, and also the attacks themselves are getting more sophisticated. You know, there's tools out there that people are now using, and the tools actually come with support packages as well. So it's a whole industry there on the sort of dark net where we're seeing, you know, people being able to pick up these tools quite cheaply to actually launch attacks onto our client base. And what we're seeing also is the attackers are getting in. You know, a survey here shows nearly 3/4 of the companies that were interviewed had some cyber attack within that year. And James Comley, their director of FBI, made a statement 18 months ago that there's two types of company, those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. So what we're really saying is, a new security approach is required. Now, a lot of us have all spent, our security budgets on a prevention-centric approach, so the firewalls, the IDS, that's still definitely required. We can catch common threats, we can catch probably 99% of your security with existing technologies we have out there. But today, with the advanced threats we're seeing, the zero-day, the low and slow sort of stealth attacks, and those targeted attacks, we're seeing it a lot harder to actually block and stop those things coming into the network. So really, LogRhythm and ForeScout as well. What we're about is, if things get into your network, and as they've said, his USB battery maybe, or his USB drive, it's a very easy way of malware being able to get into a network, or bypassing a lot of controls that are out there. So what we're really about is using big data analytics in the back end to identify those advanced threats, to be able to prioritize what we're seeing and to reduce the noise in the background. And we can even wrap an incident response workflow around there, and we can hopefully show you today some of the automation that we can put in place to prevent these breaches. And from a LogRhythm point of view, what we're really about is reducing the mean time to detect. So can we find things on the network quicker by using advanced correlation rules, cross-device correlation, being able to bring in log data, being able to look at traffic on the wire as well, to be able to pull all that in to make a security analyst's job easier in detecting those threats. And then once we've detected it, it's all about reducing the mean time to respond on it. So if we can actually reduce mean time to detect, mean time to respond, then obviously we will have a better security posture within our network. And some of the advanced threats we're seeing, they do take their time, as I said before. The firewalls, or even just social networking as well. Into the staff in coffee shops and so forth, that could all be classed as reconnaissance. And then we have some form of initial compromise. Now, from a LogRhythm point of view, you pick up some of those things, but where we really come into play is if there's actually been an attack and people are actually in on the network, and then we can start really seeing from the log sources out there, the event data we're receiving, and the advanced correlation, we can actually work out what's going on and hopefully put some early neutralization in there to actually stop any damage that a cyber incident or a data breach may come. So what we do from a LogRhythm point of view is really to reduce time to detect, we collect data from security event data from many sources on the network, and there's some example sources there. We can also pull in log and machine data, so that could be operating system data, that could be application data. So we're just pulling all that information in as well, and we can also add forensic data to that as well, so we can generate data to bring in as well, and I'll go on to that in the next couple of slides. Once we have that data, obviously it's to detect and prioritize that data that we have, so we use user analytics, so we can use user behavioral analytics, looking at say a group of developers have always been accessing these 5 servers for the last couple of weeks, then all of a sudden we're seeing one of these developers accessing a file server in another part of the network that you shouldn't be doing. So we can do some sort of behavioral analysis around the user side of it. But we're also looking at machine analytics, so all that log data that we've received, and we're having to sort of generate huge amounts of log data down to something that's very pertinent for the security analyst to look at and prioritize what he should be doing in affecting those possible breaches. So once we get that information in, we can assess the threat, we can determine a risk, we can put a risk factor against it, and then a security analyst can decide whether a full investigation is necessary, or maybe it's just noise in the network, in which case we can just tweak the rule base so we don't see that noise again. So again, it's a continuing life cycle of being sort of bubbling up the threats that we need to the surface for them to see. We can use the LogRhythm platform to provide some investigative powers. We can dig down within the data, we can drill down on the logs, we can actually find out exactly what happened 2 hours beforehand, what happened 2 hours afterwards, just to actually work out the extent of the incident and to work out where we're going to respond on this. And then we can also do things like neutralize. So this is where ForeScout comes really into play. So we can actually, we may discover something, but we've taken the information from ForeScout in the first place to give us some context around it. And then we can talk back with a two-way integration to ForeScout to actually then mitigate that risk. So LogRhythm itself, is passive with the network, but we can use other security technologies out there to provide that proactive mitigation and countermeasures. And then it'll be back to the analyst team to obviously do a clean-up, report, review on it, and then maybe adapt and put that information back into the LogRhythm Security Intelligence platform so we don't see it again, or it gets a higher risk level next time, so next time we can actually act on it quicker. So LogRhythm Security Intelligence platform is made up of really 3 areas. One is being able to pull in log data, as I said before, from everywhere, whether that's security logs, system logs, other machine data, flow data from switches side of things, application logs, or maybe audit logs. But we can also add forensic data to that by generating our own data. So we have a client that can be used. We can work agentlessly or with an agent. If you're using the endpoint agent, either on a server or a workstation, we can do things like file integrity monitoring or registry integrity monitoring. We can look at what processes are actually running on a machine, and sometimes that's quite key. I mean, if you look at things like ransomware, where ransomware will suddenly start deleting shadow copies within Windows, we can look for that process actually starting. We can look at what network communications those devices are having, where they're sending their information to or pulling information from, and we can look at additional user activity on the actual endpoints. And our second point of forensic data generation is using our network monitoring tool. So we can use network taps or spam ports and actually look at traffic in real time, being able to identify up to 2,700 different applications by various methods and signatures and behaviors of those applications, and provide deep back analysis on that, but also packet capture. So we can do full packet capture, but we also have something called smart capture, where we're only capturing a small percentage of the traffic to reduce the storage overhead, but it's information that may be required in the event of investigation. So a rule or an alarm may kick off in the LogRhythm platform, and we'll start recording traffic at that point. Or it may be that we're just recording traffic to certain areas of the network. Our second stage is around the analytics piece. So machine analytics in our machine data intelligence fabric in the back end, doing cross-device correlation, doing statistical analysis, behavioral profiling. What we can also do is threat and risk contextualization. So we can actually make different hosts on the network a different threat or a different risk. So a finance server may be high threat, or a web server and a DMZ may be high risk. But using technologies such as ForeScout, we can also take information from them to change the threat and risk contextualization on the fly as well, and we'll hopefully show you that through the demo. And then once we have that data in there, obviously it's being able to actually use it and do forensic analysis on it, so searching. So we now have the new version 7 out with our Elasticsearch backend, so we can do full unstructured searching across a big data platform. Being able to visualize that, easy for the security analysts, but also being able to pivot and drill down on that data very quickly in a real-time view in a very easy-to-use web console. And then from an output side of things, it's being able to prioritize those risks so they know which ones to action on first. Being able to maybe, from an incident response point of view, keep a complete workflow of how we're working the incident. And a key feature here is the automated response, and we'll go into that during the demo, where we can talk back to these security devices, so we can talk back to ForeScout and issue something that we'd like to do, and then ForeScout can actually then initiate that remediation side of things. And everyone's interested afterwards, we have a solution brief built around the LogRhythm and the ForeScout solution. It explains exactly how the two sort of technologies will work. And at that point, I think I'll hand over to Rich Agar.
So, Rich, are you there?
I am here, yes, Dave.
Okay, I'll make you the panelist now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
But guys, just quickly, one thing I forgot to say earlier on is any of you do have any questions, do ask them in the question box and we will pick them up at the end of the session. Rich, I'll go quiet. I'll leave it to you. Speak to you in a bit.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about ForeScout and the 3 areas that we operate in, and then we'll go to the demo. So the 3 areas that ForeScout help organizations with are see, control, and orchestrate. And I'll just show you one slide on each of these, and then when we get to the demo, you'll see each of those working. So the first part, C, is all about visibility. That's providing organizations with real-time visibility of every single device that's connected to the network. And we do that without having to have any agent software installed on the endpoints. That's a really important point now. We're seeing incredible growth in the number of devices that are connecting to a network, and many of those devices are not able to have agent software installed on them. Seeing significant growth in IoT devices, BYOD devices coming into corporate networks where we're not able to manage those devices using traditional endpoint agents. So it's very important to have an agentless approach, and also to have that visibility being continuous. So it's not just about assigning the right network access when something joins the network, it's about monitoring that device for the duration of its connection. So typically we see 2 different categories in an organization: managed endpoints and unmanaged endpoints. So a managed endpoint would be your traditional Windows, Linux, Mac systems, VMware, network devices, and applications that are running on top of all of that. So things that we already have visibility of within the organization. Now some of those may suffer from some issues. They may have out-of-date antivirus, they may have missing operating system patches that mean that they're vulnerable to certain exploits, and they may even have broken agents. So we typically rely on agent software installed on endpoints to be able to get visibility of their security status for AV or for OS updates, etc. If those agents are broken, we're blind to those devices. And then, of course, we have many unmanaged devices. So this could be the BYOD that I mentioned before, but we're seeing more and more devices being connected to corporate networks, such as TVs, projectors, CCTV, building access control systems, HVAC systems, etc., etc. More and more of those devices are being connected, and they can't have any agent software installed on them. So typically, we say that devices sit into 2 different areas: the devices that are visible, that can be managed, and the devices that are not visible and cannot be managed. And at ForeScout, what we do is we provide organizations with visibility of every single device that's connected to the network, what kind of device it is, what its security posture is, and we continue to monitor that throughout the duration of the connection. So that's the visibility that we provide at ForeScout under C. We then take that information and we can share that with other systems that exist within an organization's network. Now looking at control, we're not just about providing visibility. We want organizations to be able to control and respond to certain situations. So that can be something as simple as informing a user when they need to perform an action. Maybe they haven't updated their patches recently. Maybe they've been on holiday and their antivirus is out of date. Maybe they're trying to access a protected system and you want to inform the user that they are being monitored when they're accessing that system. But we've got various techniques to be able to inform users that we're monitoring their access on the network. From a response point of view, we can segment the network into different parts to make sure that the appropriate network access is given when it's needed. So employees would get access to a production network. Maybe somebody working in finance would have some additional access to finance systems, and contractors coming in would only be able to access the systems that they need to. When it comes to controlling endpoints, it's possible for us to be able to integrate with the management systems that exist. If their endpoint is broken, we can restart those agents, we can install applications, we can run scripts, we can restart antivirus and update antivirus. So we can do a lot of automated remediation on those endpoints. That means the user doesn't need to be involved and the help desk doesn't need to be involved. And finally, we can share all of that information with the existing IT systems. Now looking at orchestration, one of the significant advantages of ForeScout is we don't keep all of this information to ourselves. We want to share the information, the visibility we have of all of the devices that exist on the network. And we want to share that with different security technologies that exist in customers' environments. So we can tell third-party systems when a device has joined the network and whether its security posture is good or not good. They can then use that information, process that, and then they can come back to us and get us to enforce an action. And that's exactly what we'll see in the demonstration with ForeScout and with LogRhythm. The main point here is that we're sharing that information, so we're getting better visibility, and we're able to automate workflows. So the time from identifying that there's an issue to being able to respond to it and reduce that threat is significantly reduced with these automated workflows. So just to summarize, we provide organizations with real-time visibility of every single device that's connected to the network. We do that without any gaps, and we can do that without having to install any agents on those endpoints. We've got a broad range of different responses spanning user, endpoint, network, and existing IT systems. And we integrate all that information with third-party systems to help reduce that security fragmentation, to share that information, and to provide a much faster response. And just to show you that we are one of the leaders in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Network Access Control. There's ForeScout Technologies up there. The only other two vendors who are in the Leaders Quadrant are actually network vendors themselves. So that one significant advantage of ForeScout is that we are network agnostic, so we can work with any different network technology that a customer may have deployed. So I'm going to jump straight into the demo now. So you should be able to see the ForeScout screen here. Now this is showing a number of different hosts I have on my network. I'm just going to jump in and show you the kind of information that we can get about a specific endpoint. So I'm going to pick on this one here. I'll just double click on that, and then that's going to open up a window where we can see a lot of information about that host. So network information like the IP address, the MAC address, the host name, etc. But I can also see that that host is a domain number. I can see that it doesn't have any external devices connected, but there are some unpatched Microsoft vulnerabilities that exist on that host. That's valuable information. I can see that antivirus is installed and it is running, but unfortunately that hasn't been updated since the 8th of April. So again, useful information there. I've also got visibility of the operating system, so I know exactly what operating system it is. And I can see the switch that it's connected via and the switch port, so and the VLAN information. So if I want to be able to perform some action, I've got all of that information to be able to do that. So that's all done well, but that provides a device-by-device view. So what we can also do is, with our inventory screen, because we're reaching out and we're managing all the devices across the network, we can provide a consolidated view of the devices that exist on the network. So a simple example of that would be to see what TCP and UDP ports are open across the network. So I might want to say what devices have got a web server enabled on them. And I can see that in the open port screen by selecting port 80. I might want to see what devices have Telnet enabled. Maybe one of my compliance policies is not to use Telnet, but to use SSH. So I immediately get visibility of the devices that have Telnet running. I can also see Windows versions. So what versions of operating system do I have that exist on my network? Here I've got Windows 7, 2008 and 2012 servers. Typically in a proof of concept we see XP machines and Windows 2003 servers. Now, they're no longer supported by Microsoft, and so there's an increasing number of vulnerabilities being exploited that will not be patched by Microsoft. So it's great to have visibility of those hosts and see where they are. So again, if I want to identify a specific host, I can click on Windows 7 and then immediately I can see what those machines are, and I can drill down into that if I want to, as I did previously. I can do the same for Mac. I can see what versions of Mac are deployed across my network. I can see if any of those are missing patches. And so there was a new patch released by Apple a few days ago. I can see that I've got a machine on my home network that hasn't yet applied that patch. So that's useful information there. I can also get a consolidated view similar to that, but from Microsoft's point of view. I can see what devices on my network are missing certain Microsoft patches. Again, if I've got a few hundred or a few thousand devices on a network, it's very useful to be able to see what patches are missing and where. I can also look at network information, so I can look at switch ports. And I can see here that I've got a single switch port that has 3 devices connected to it. And that might be an indication that there is an unmanaged switch or a hub in place. I might want to be able to respond to that. In this instance, actually, this is my work network, and I can see that I've got 3 devices there, so my work laptop, my mobile phone, and this network device here is an access point. But yeah, we're providing that visibility of how many devices are connected and where, so we can respond to that. And the final thing I'll show you here is external devices. So these are USB devices that are connected to any device that's on my managed network. And I just have 2 here. I've got a USB serial adapter and I've got a USB memory stick. I just want to draw your attention to this section here. So we've got a list that we're maintaining on the system of authorized USB devices. So we've said it's acceptable on our policy to have a USB to serial adapter installed, and we maintain that list. But we don't have that list setting for this flash drive. So you'll see that when we start to get to policy, you'll see how we use that information to be able to identify a host and provide some kind of remediation. So I'm just quickly going to show you now that I've got a Windows desktop here. This is a managed Windows machine. You can see its IP address. It's pinging something on that same subnet. That ping really is just intended to show that this device has network access. But just remember that IP address, that 46.1 address. Now I just want to see that specific host. So I'm going to filter my view here just to that 46.1 address, and I can double click on that and I can see some information about that host. And just to confirm, I can see that that does have that USB device that we just looked at. So that's within my view of that system. I can see that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to have a look at some policies now. And I've just got two policies that are relevant to this demonstration. The first one here is looking at USB devices. So all of the policies that exist within ForeScout are condition and action. When we see a certain condition, we perform a certain action. So this high-level condition here is that there is an external device that is enabled. So that's that USB device. I've then got a number of sub-rules. Now you can think of sub-rules as firewall-like rules, first match rules. And so the first rule is this external device in that list we looked at previously of authorized USB devices? If it is, I'll perform an action, and that action is to add to a group, and you should be able to see there that the group name is authorized USB devices. That's all I do. It's already been authorized. The next rule, so if I don't match that first rule, I go to the second rule, and that next rule doesn't have any conditions, but it has two actions. So the first action is to add to a group called unauthorized USB devices, and the second action is to send a syslog message, and that syslog message contains this free text, unauthorized USB device, and then we append that with the IP address, the username, and the host name. So in policy, when that condition matches, we'll send a message to LogRhythm for them to be able to process. So the second policy I'm going to show you, and the final policy, is this one here. So the condition is that we receive a message back from the SIM containing the message add to quarantine. And when we match that condition, we will then perform a number of actions. The first one is add that to a group called quarantine hosts. The second is to add an endpoint address ACL. So this is an ACL that actually gets enforced on the switch port that blocks access to the network from that host. We've got a couple of exceptions here. Really those exceptions are to allow ForeScout to be able to manage the device and for it to be able to reach its remediation server. So now what I'm going to do, I've had that USB policy turned off deliberately because I want to be able to trigger that USB device. I'm going to enable that policy, and then you'll see we'll detect that USB stick, we'll apply that policy, we will send a message to LogRhythm. LogRhythm will process that, correlate that with information it knows about the host, and then it should send a message back to us, and then we'll see the LogRhythm control policy update. So I'm just going to start my USB policy now. And you should see immediately that this PC, 46.1 PC, has had that syslog message sent because of it, and that message has gone to LogRhythm, it's processed it, correlated it, and it's sent a message back. So we've now matched this LogRhythm control policy, and that policy has applied the endpoint ACL. So if we go back to manage host, now we can see that ping that was running has stopped running, so we don't have access to our local network. And as a user, we want to provide some information to that user. So if they open up their browser, we could alternatively have automatically started the browser. We're informing the user that their computer is being quarantined, They won't be able to access any of their applications until this issue has been resolved, and then we're providing a link that enables those users to be able to follow some instructions and hopefully remediate themselves. So that's the end of the ForeScout part of the demo. I'm going to hand back to Rich Ferrier now, and he's going to go through and show you what happened at the LogRhythm end of things between ForeScout sending a message saying I've got an unauthorized USB device to LogRhythm responding and asking ForeScout to contain that.
Right, okay, I'll just make Rich Ferrier the panelist. There we go, Rich, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Dave.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so hopefully you're seeing what a security analyst would see using the LogRhythm platform. So this is one of the main dashboards. It's a web UI into it, very sort of clean and easy to use. They have a selection of dashboards they could use from like executive level for maybe operations side of things, for network threat detections, and for different compliance reasons. Maybe there's a retail customer with PCI, so we can do all sorts of dashboarding. These can be public or private dashboards. So public ones, anyone that using the system within that environment can access those, or you can actually set up your own dashboards within it. And the dashboards themselves can obviously be resized, removed. You can add new widgets to it. So have the data looking exactly as you want to see it. All the dashboards themselves are fully drill downable within it. So if I pick random here, user login failures on the right-hand side, some of the top common events we're seeing, I can double-click. It will open up a new page. And it will then drill down within that data, and it will show me more details about those user login failures. It's just coming through now. So here we can see, some of the top users. So this Paul Fisher person obviously is one of the key user login failures. And again, we can drill down to the next level within that as well to find out more information, find out what host they're using, where they're located, and so forth. So there's plenty of information that can be easily grabbed by a security analyst just by simple clicks within the dashboard. But as a security analyst, what I'm more interested in really is anything that is being correlated in the back end, all those millions of events that we're seeing from across the network coming in, being able to reduce that to something that's pertinent to the security analyst to go after and have a look at and maybe raise an incident. So if we look at the alarms tab now, and hopefully what we would have seen had this been from the ForeScout thing, we have actually an alarm here. Now how this alarm was made up was, what we have is a list. So when Rich was talking about sending off that detail by syslog of we've seen a host with an unauthorized USB, it got added to a list here, suspicious hosts. So the hosts that have been identified of out of policy from ForeScout, and it starts populating this list with the IP addresses of those devices. So we can use that list to actually change the sort of threat and risk classification of the host. So we sort of network traffic hitting things like our threat list. So we can put in threat lists, either commercial ones or open source threat lists, IP reputation, using the sticks format. So we can pull that information in. A lot of time we get a lot of noise of maybe devices that are trying to connect out to those, but in this case, because that device was actually on another list, it's been escalated as a suspicious device. It's given us a higher risk rating, and therefore it's something that the analyst wants to know about. And if we look at the actual alarm itself, we can get some quick details on the device that's doing it, and we can also look at why that rule fired as well. So, the classification is suspicious. It's on the suspicious list, so it's increased the risk rating to a 9. It's a high, so therefore it's generating a prioritized list for us. In this case, we've pulled that detail from our network monitor product. So we've seen the traffic going out on the wire. We could pull that in from a firewall or an IDS as well. So that's how we've come to find of this actual event. Now, if we drill down to the event itself, we can just click the drill down button, it will go away and it will search and it will bring back any information that was required for this rule to trigger. So if we just click on the actual results here, we have a new window. And what we should see is how that rule was kicked off and the information below it. So we can look at the host, we can look at the location, we can see where it's coming from. So we've got the information within it. We can actually look at the log itself. We can bring up the logs tab. Here's the log that actually generated that traffic. Within that log message, we can obviously look at the breakdown of the log. We can actually download a PCAP as well. So if we want to pull out the traffic side of things, here we can just download the PCAP and then replay that through something like Wireshark. We can look at the raw log message itself and find out information about it, so it's right at the fingertips of the actual user. And if ForeScout hadn't passed us the username, which they can do, we can also do an inferred history on it as well. So we can say, okay, we've seen these people on this device in this amount of time, so it could be any of these people that did it. So we can actually do some inferred history around it as well. And also if we wanted to look at maybe what else that machine's been up to, so just to add to our investigation, we can actually do a pivot on it. So we can say, okay, in the last 2 hours and the 2 hours afterwards maybe, and then do a search on that and then find out what else that machine's been doing, just to add to the investigation side of things. Now if I go back up to the alarm itself, what we can see here, there was 2 smart response actions. So this is our automated remediation side of things. So one of those smart response actions would have been to send the information back to ForeScout to say quarantine this device, and as it shows, that's how the device got quarantined. The other smart response action could be to disable that user's account within AD. So we have, scripts that will run. So PowerShell script talking to AD, or we could do that also in XML-based side of things. But the smart response to ForeScout was an immediate one. It just went and did it to actually reduce the mean time to respond. So we get that automated straight into it, quarantine that device. The second one, for the disabling the AD account, we can actually say, okay, let's put some authorization around it. So we can be very clever about how we use smart response. So it could be the fact that we send off an email, the security analyst or the Wintel team may get an email from LogRhythm saying, we've seen suspicious activity on the network, would you like to disable this user? So they can then authorize the smart response to be taking place. Because obviously we don't want to start blocking users doing their job, we just want to block threats. Now it could be that we can even put time-based around that as well. So during work hours we might ask for authorization. If we're weekends, out of hours in the evening, we're seeing things like this, we can just say automate that response. But in the case for the ForeScout one, we automated the quarantine and we've authorized for the AD users. Once we have obviously decided that there is maybe something that we need to investigate here, we can open up a case. So we can just put in a new case. We can add that alarm to the case. We can add some notes to the case as well. So ForeScout quarantine. We can add in files. So we might want to add in the PCAP file that we downloaded earlier. We can tag it as a suspicious host, and all that information then becomes useful when we're searching back through our case management system. And as we're going through the case, we can raise the actual priority of it. So we can go from incident, we can go to mitigated because we've already sent off a smart response. And because that host is now then off the network, we've sent out a team to investigate it, we can move that to resolve within the case management system. So it's a very, very simple, clean way of being able to find information across many different sort of technologies out there. So it is mainly all automated, simple drill down. Let me just go back up to the page. And we can do that across a number of different technologies. So from a LogRhythm point of view, ForeScout has done most of the work there in the remediation side of it, being able to tell LogRhythm that something should be of a higher risk, and also being able to take the action against it in an automated fashion. all the LogRhythm platform doing is just correlating that information across. So where the ForeScout can't see all the other devices on the network, as LogRhythm is that integral part of pulling all that information in, we can make that cross-device correlation sort of investigation and pull out those sort of threats. And that's really all I wanted to show you really within the actual LogRhythm platform, the simplicity of actually pulling that information back. So I think with that, I'll hand back to Dave to see if there's any questions.
Thanks very much, Rich. That was really, really good and really useful from both of you, both Richards. It's really nice to see the two vendors working together and presenting some good information. So let me just pull this back so that we've all got the same view, which should just be the blank view. So we have had some questions. Rich, I think hopefully you can see the ones I've allocated to you. The first one, which we've got from a number of different sources, is just the difference, this one for you, Rich Agar, the difference between agent and agentless in ForeScout. Is that something you can just cover off quickly for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as I mentioned when I was presenting, we don't need to have an agent installed at all, and we do have an agent software. Some customers like to use that, but we don't need to install that at all. So if we're not using an agent and it's a managed device, then we connect into that device with remote credentials using, if it's a Windows system, WMI, SMB or remote registry. And there's secure methods of being able to remotely connect into a system to be able to query it for its compliance status. If it's Linux or it's Mac, then we use SSH, but perform essentially the same action of identifying the compliance status of that device. If it's not a managed device, then we actually look at a number of other different factors. Typically we would see a network span, so we can see how the device is communicating across the network. We can look at TCP window sizes, we can look at DHCP options, we can look at doing an Nmap scan of the device, see what ports are open, and look at the banners that get presented back to us. So there's lots of different ways that without having to have an agent installed, we can identify an endpoint and start to apply policies to it. Does that answer your question, Dave?
Yep, it does. Thank you very much. There was another question, which kind of I think you've probably answered, but somebody specifically asked the question about, I mean, they've said Microsoft Surface devices, but I guess any Microsoft-based device that are just used on the internet, are we able to report back real-time to ForeScout and be managed as well? I guess you've kind of answered that, but is that something you can just highlight for us?
So it will really depend on whether it's a corporate managed device or not. If it's a corporate managed device, we connect into it using the technique that I mentioned before. If it's BYOD, then we can ask that user if they want to be able to use that device on the corporate network. We can ask them to install an agent. If they're prepared to do that, we can install our dissolvable agent. Just runs for the duration of that boot cycle. And that gives us some visibility of that host. If they're not prepared to do that, then we can say, okay, we'll still allow access. However, all we'll do is give them internet access. There's quite a lot of different options that we can have depending on what the endpoint is, who owns it, what they're prepared to do.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Rich Ferrier, are you there? I saw you dropped off for a second.
I am. Sorry about that. I did. Yeah, it did drop. I'm back.
Good.
Yeah.
So we've done a couple of ForeScout questions. Couple we've had just specifically. I'm just trying to dig through them. We had one person ask, I noticed the LogRhythm console is not using HTTPS. It was using HTTPS, it was just using a private certificate, not a public certificate, I think is correct to say, isn't it, Rich, just to clarify that?
That's right, yeah. That's just my demo box, yeah.
So ForeScout orchestration with Azure features Intune and advanced thread analytics, ? That's one for you, Rich Agar, but just while I'm digging through this, is that something you can answer? Is that enough information?
I'm not sure I understand the question, actually, Dave.
Yeah, no.
You know who asked the question. We can maybe take that offline.
Yeah, we'll have a look at that. Lots of ForeScout questions. LogRhythm, particularly interested to hear how systems can be used to identify where undertext and ransomware attack is actively encrypting files and folders.
Yes. Okay. So ransomware is something that we are very much on at the moment. When we speak to our customers and our CISOs, and we ask for them their top 10 list of what keeps them awake at night. Ransomware is on every single one of those lists. So there are a number of different sort of IOCs that we could do for ransomware. I mentioned one earlier. If we've got the agent there, we can look at services that are being started. So a known ransomware thing is to be able to delete the shadow copies on a Windows box. So we can look for that service starting up. Looking for the change in the file names. Looking for things like .locky. Even by then, maybe it's too late. But it's about getting that network, that host off the network as fast as possible. Now, the person's interested in it. There are some very, very good demonstrations on YouTube. If you go to the LogRhythm YouTube page, there's some recent ones for ransomware that go up, and it's probably best, rather than me sort of prattling on this, is just to go and have a look at those YouTube videos. I think they're done by one of our SEs who's just recently moved out to America, Chris Martin. So they are very informative, and he'll step through exactly how we look at those sort of indicators of compromise and act against it.
Cool, thank you. One last question, multi-user environments. Analytics within multi-user environments, i.e. a Citrix server or a terminal server or something like that. What capability do we have to differentiate?
So we have a thing called entities, so we can have those different entities looking at different areas of the network. Again, if we're using things like the agent within Citrix server environment, we can pull things back. We can just pull the logs centrally. I mean, a lot of that is sort of a centralized platform anyway, so it's very easy to get the logs from it. So we can still work within those sort of virtualized environments, not a problem.
Okay, cool, thank you. And the last question we have, which is a last ForeScout one for you, Rich. 802.1x, we didn't mention that specifically.
Okay, right. So 802.1x is a network access control technology. We fully support 802.1x. We can use that to be able to assign network access if an organization wants to use that. However, we don't need to use 802.1x. We can achieve everything that 802.1x does without having to use that protocol, and that tends to mean that organizations can have a much faster rollout of their network access control pre-admission policy, and they may not need to upgrade their switches. There are sometimes we speak to organizations and they think they want to use 802.1x, and they realize that to do that they're going to have to upgrade their edge switches, and that adds a significant time and cost to the project. So we can achieve everything without the need for .1x. But if an organization wants to use that, absolutely we support it.
Okay, cool, thank you very much. So we've had a couple of just other very, very specific questions for people. What we'll do with those guys is that we've taken a copy of them, and people will come back to you individually rather than doing a public reply to it. I want to say thank you very much to the two Riches for doing this session for us today. It's great to see the two vendors cooperating and a real live demo working between the two different products. Very unusual to get two vendors to do that on a webinar, and I really appreciate the hard work both of you must have put into getting that working for us, guys, so thanks a lot. As always, everybody, if you've got any questions, do come back to your account manager. We will be sending back feedback questionnaires, surveys, etc. And thank you very much for your attendance today. It's greatly appreciated. And Rich, thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Cheers.